your life is super interesting, compelling, and intriguing. No, really, it is. That everyday stuff that you go through on a daily basis, it's gold. It's pure gold for you and your business because there is a way to turn those everyday stories that you come across into sales, clients, customers, email signups, program signups, whatever it is you're looking for, there is a segue to get you there. And that's what we're talking about today. My very good friend and return guest, Brenna McGowan, is here to take us through the whole process. You're going to love it. Episode 131 starts right now. Hey there, welcome to the Lora Shipman Show. We hang out here weekly to talk about things like social media, entrepreneurship, marketing, tools, strategies, tips, and it all starts right now. Hey there, before we get started with this show, I just want to share my passion with you. I love teaching people just like you how to master social media for business, breaking it down into easy to consume and easy to execute steps so that you can see immediate results. So whether you want to start a social media consultancy or grow your brand's presence on social media, I can help. I can help you get started and master all the things that you need to know. So I want you to go over to my website. It is filled with resources, tools, tips, and courses. Visit lorashipman.com. That's Lora Shipman.com to get all the goods. Now, you ready for the show? I know I am. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. As you guys know, I've got my very special friend, Brenna McGowan here. Brenna, hey, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back. You're like a multiple repeat guest here.
I'm very honored.
I'm excited because I love having you on the show. I only wish we lived closer to each other because I think we'd be like in real life besties. We'd be going out doing stuff. I know it.
I know. I'm going to come to you in Florida though, because I think although I'm in California, which has nice weather, but I think you're even warmer than us, which I want all the warmth.
Although we're pretty cold here today for us Floridians, and we're like in the 60s. I don't know. That's cold for me. So for those of our listeners who don't know who you are, who haven't heard you on the show before, can you give them just a little bit of a background of who you are and what you do?
Yes, my name is Brenna McGowan. I specialize in email and Instagram copy. I also run a membership called the Content Bar, where we help women entrepreneurs with their content. But mostly what I really specialize and help people with is taking their everyday stories and being able to create content from that. And I love Instagram is my favorite platform, social platform, but I am also a huge proponent of getting people from Instagram and onto our email list, because that's where, our relationship with our list goes a step deeper. And I think in email too, you can even be more personable than you can be even on Instagram. It feels to me a little bit safer and more intimate. And that's what I love about email marketing.
Yeah, it is. You've taught me so many great things about email marketing. I mean, I wish I'd known you years ago, so I knew all this stuff. And today you're going to talk to us about segues, which I struggle with, but you are a master at. You're like the goddess of segues. You do such a great job at it. And I'm excited for me and for my audience to learn from you today about these.
I'm excited. It's my favorite subject to talk about. So, and then we should mention when we say segues, because it is maybe a little bit abstract, it's spelled Segues, which is not the Segway that you ride on. It's the segue is essentially a transition sentence that we use in our writing. And what it does is it helps us tie what our when we're in our writing, tie story together to our call to action. The difference in when you're using a segue than other times is that you're being really specific about drawing some type of metaphor or parallel into what you're actually writing. And the segue sentence there is kind of the anchor that ties these two parts together.
Okay, that's a good, I like that description of how you explain what a segue is. But you're going to take us a little bit deeper into what a segue is, because you've got like a special acronym, right? For us to help us remember what does that look like?
Well, I've have a framework, and this is something to help you when you sit down to write. A lot of times, we're not sure, like, not only what do I say, but where do I put these? The parts of my writing. How do I structure it?
Mhm.
So I've created the segue framework recently, and actually, your podcast is the first one for me to debut it on.
Yay.
Yay! We are the first thing that we need when we are in our writing, and you can use this in both email and for your captions as well, when you're doing maybe a longer story like caption, kind of one of those mini blogs. The first thing is we always want to start off, the S in the segue is with a stellar subject or headline. A subject line would of course be what is going to be in an email. A headline is going to be what becomes before the more part on Instagram. We want to think of things. My favorite way to do this, especially for subject lines, but even on Instagram, is to create some type of open loop, some type of curiosity. Someone the other day in a group I was in their subject line, they wrote something like the 5 tips to losing weight. Well,
Mhm.
you're already giving people too much in my mind in that subject line, right? I would like to do something. Maybe it's someone who's not interested in losing weight today, or someone's like, oh, I'm so tired of people talking about losing weight. I don't want to open an email. Losing weight seems like a lot hard. The 5, and so I would think of something that is maybe a little bit more curiosity inducing. And of course, I'm thinking of this sample on the fly, but I would do something along like the 5 steps to feel better when you wake up tomorrow morning, or the 5 steps no one else is telling you about. Something that is going to be like, what is no one else telling me about? And like I said, I don't know if those are great examples, but I always try and figure out something that's going to be, we're all part, whether we want to be or not, we're all super curious about other people. We all are nosy, and want to know what's going on in someone else's life, or how we can do things better or easier. So I really think about human psychology a lot when I write my headlines for or my subject lines in my emails, or my headlines on Instagram. And I may have even said this on one of your previous podcasts. David Ogilvy talks about how your headline or your subject line is 80%. Once you get a great headline, 80% of your writing is done. That's how important these initial subject lines or headlines are. So we always want to start off with spending a decent amount of time in our subject lines. For me, a lot of times too, I go back and do this at the end. I might have an idea, but a lot of times I have to write, and then I think, how could I make this even better? And sometimes that happens with the rest of my writing.
That's a good tip, because I usually start off with the headline first and then write afterwards. But I think you're right. I think you just get all of your stuff out first and then put that captivating subject line. I like that.
Right. And sometimes the subject line you write at first happens to be the one that, if you have something in your head, write it down. Absolutely. But always go back and kind of revisit it and see, is this going to work, or can I tweak this to make it just a little bit better? And that always helps with our open rates and helps with people clicking more on Instagram for sure.
Cool. I love that. So that's stellar subject or headline is our first one.
Exactly.
Okay. What's our E?
So the E is an eccentric story.
Ooh.
Now, when I say eccentric, it was a great adjective. This doesn't have to be life-changing. This is eccentric to you, right? Like, people, once again, we're curious about what other people are doing in their day-to-day lives. And I think we all want to know that we're normal. I know I do, right? Especially with my stories. Like, I want to know that I am not a weirdo. And so when I hear other people talk about maybe how they yelled at their kids in the morning, or how they're about to pull their, I'm on a kid rampage the last couple of days, like how my kids can't pick up dirty socks off the floor, or even better, like I found a pair of socks next to the TV the other day. Like, that's how lazy they are. They're taking their socks off and putting them next to my television. Like, those are the kind of things, but those are the stories that we relate to. So these don't have to be, life-changing, life-altering stories. These are things that are happening every day. I believe it was Laura Belgray who talked about how something about how she goes, wide. Like she writes a lot of stories, but they don't have to be these super deep stories. And if anything, some of these funny day-to-day life things that happen to us are even more funny and keep you top of mind when we're going through these things on a daily basis. So, that is the second part, is we want to create some type of story, but it doesn't have to be something life altering. I will also mention here, when it comes to the story, this is the difference. Writing these stories in your emails, writing these stories in your captions are the difference of someone who wants to open your email because they want to hear from you as a friend versus someone ignoring your email because they don't want to hear another sales message.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of emails that I open from people that I know are going to sell to me, but I want to know what they're going to say. I want to know what's going on in their lives. It's a way to build know, like, and trust very easily. So the beauty of what I teach and what's around us is that we have these little connection machines called stories that we're able to easily connect to our ideal audience. And this is how you can go and talk about yourself and what you're doing without being salesy, is by using these stories. So I really want to emphasize how important stories are, even during a promotional period where you're sending out a lot of emails. For example, I'm in a promotion period right now, and I got an email yesterday was, I love the emails that you're sending me every day, because I'm sending funny, interesting, or not interesting, however you want to look at it, stories to my list. So it's really a great way to build know, like, and trust. And stories are how we remember things and stay top of mind. So I really would, for anyone who's writing their regular emails, to definitely be including story every time you send something out, for the most part.
And I like how you say it doesn't have to be like something earth shattering. It's just sometimes the story's in the mundane, right? Because we're all in that mundane daily routine. You just got to look for it, right? And just talk about it.
And it could be as simple as like what you're watching on TV. And I would encourage you even to think about how, like, maybe something you throw on your Instagram stories. These are things you can talk about in your emails. Maybe it's a new Netflix binge, or, what you're watching. And the thing that I love about using stories as well, it helps define you as a brand. For most of us, we're all doing very similar things to the person next to us. And how I try, I think we all struggle with it to some degree, how I really try and stay out of this competition mindset is that I'm telling people enough stories about me and what's going on and my view in life that they're either going to be attracted to me or they're going to be repelled from me. And then the sale once again becomes easier, because a lot of times when we are using these day-to-day stories and the viewpoint on how my perspective, and we might have a situation like someone else's daughter throwing their socks on next to the TV may not even bug them, right? Mm-hmm. They might be like, okay, I'm just going to pick these up and put them away. It's not something where I'm like going to pull every last hair out of my head if it happens again. So there's kind of these perspectives that make us stand out a little bit differently than the person next to us. And then we don't have to worry about as much competition as well.
And that becomes the voice of your brand too, and just people begin to see that out on the internet or wherever you're marketing to. They begin to, link those two things together. And I think that really helps a lot. Oh, that's good. I like that. The poor socks. Okay. So what's the G?
I feel like it's always what I end up talking about. It's like what's frustrating me today. The G is where we get into, I might change my adjective for the G, but for now it's a great segue. So this is the part where we take the segue of our story, or that we start transitioning over. One thing to keep in mind when we're talking about stories is I'm never writing a story without having my reader in mind. So a couple of points that we can look at it like that is, first of all, I'm not going to tell a story that doesn't have a point that might help the reader in some regard. I joke around. My newest joke is, you don't want to be the person telling stories at a dinner party that people run from. You don't want to be the person on the internet telling stories that people don't want to listen to because there's no good point. So the segue is the vehicle to really drive your point home from what you're telling your story about. The other thing I'd like to say about that too is that your segue is where you create the parallel to the mundane-ish story to the really important part of the email, which is what comes up next. So I love using segues to be able to tie, our story and our call to action together.
So, and I don't want to go into this right now, but you're going to give us some examples of what that looks like, right? Because that's the thing that I struggle with is that transition. Like, how do I turn, I don't know, doing laundry into something else, a call to action or something? So don't tell us yet. Let's get through the acronym, but then we'll come back for those examples, which I can't wait for.
That sounds perfect.
Okay.
The next part is our unique point of view. So that's the you that comes. And this is kind of where you're tying that segue, your unique point of view of your story into what's going to be, your call to action. So of course you can't go just from transition sentence to call to action. We have to give some type of explanation of why this is important to the reader. And this is the part where your unique point of view comes in, talking about your story in relation to your business. So that is the you. And I think that will make a little bit more sense when we go into the example part of it.
Okay.
And
cool.
the E in here is an effective CTA. One of the biggest things that I see people not doing, especially on Instagram, is they're not using an effective CTA. And we should have CTAs a lot more than you think. We want to tell the reader what to do and how to do it. And especially on Instagram, when I can think about an effective CTA, I have a two-pronged approach. It's a little bit different because I think it's a little bit easier on email in terms of you can easily click, you can easily reply. But on Instagram, I'm always thinking, okay, I don't want to be too broad in my CTA. So I want to have a very specific CTA. So for example, I might see someone say like, what's something that keeps you motivated today? Okay, that's kind of broad in my mind. Like I want to make it so easy for the person. I almost want to plan it in their head so that they're easily going to type out, a response. So maybe I would say like, what's one thing in your morning routine that keeps you motivated during the day? Okay, all of a sudden there, it has a lot more, I'm being a lot more specific. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I want to make it easy. Just yesterday, I think I saw someone, or I guess it was last week, they wrote like, tell me the 5 ways or the 5 things you're going to do this weekend or something along those lines. And all of a sudden we're thinking, there's no way someone's going to tell us 5 things that they're doing. Can we say, tell us one thing? That makes it easy. Can I give them a list? Like, which one would you choose? A, B, C, or D? So when I'm thinking about an effective CTA, I'm really thinking about how can I be as super specific with my call to action as possible, and how can I make the action as easy as possible? So on an email too, can they easily click over? Do you want them to simply reply to you? Tell them that you want them to reply. Sometimes I think we don't realize that we're not being as specific as we need to be because we know what action we want the user to take. We're not thinking through it from the other side. So always take a moment with any CTA and really think about the user path and how we can make it easier.
That's a really good point. Like, you're right. We do constantly think from our frame of reference and not the person who's actually consuming the information that you're putting out there. So if you could put yourself in their shoes and see what path would they take, what steps would they take to get there, that would make your writing a lot more effective, I think.
Definitely.
That's a really good
That's
point.
one of the things when I go through and help people with their writing and look at welcome series, or I'm always going through and thinking, okay, would I do this? If I was reading this, would I take this action? If not, what can I do to tweak it just a little bit? And a lot of times these are just simple tweaks in our CTAs that will make them 100% more effective.
That's really good. Yeah, you should always be asking yourself those questions as you're forming whatever you're writing. Okay, so I love the acronym segue. So now we know what to do. Now comes like the juicy part where you give us some examples of how to make that transition, because this is something I stumble with. I'm not going to lie. Like I don't sometimes know how to be that clever to make it happen. So what do we do?
Well, first of all, and this is true with any of your writing, is being clear over clever. So the first step with writing segues is when you're learning or starting to do this more and more in your writing, definitely go for the clear. I have a segue guide, which I think you're going to link to in your show notes. And in this guide, I was super blessed to collaborate with top copywriters like Lora and Chris Orzechowski and Marisa Corcoran, where I take and show you examples of how they've done this. But at the end of that guide, I give you 10 simple segues you can start using today. So I'm going to give you, so it's like literally, I tell you, okay, these are the ones that you can use that are really simple, that don't take too much thought. So a couple examples are, a segue that you could use is, why am I telling you this story? Right there, all of a sudden you're tying, your story into your call to action. How does this story apply to you? What's the moral of this story? Why should you even care about, and you can use your own voice in there too. Why should you even care what I'm saying? And then you tell them why they should care. So all of a sudden you're creating this like unique transition over into the main point of what you're talking about. The way that you can stay out of being cheesy, I think the first one, or clunky with and that was, I think,
That was me.
I think that was something that we wrote in our questions is that's the first way. Just being really clear, like, don't overthink this. And a lot of times we overthink with our writing when it comes to just in general, don't overthink it. I'll give you a couple examples of, segues that I've used that are maybe more sophisticated, but hopefully the example will make it very clear. I wrote an email about being a millennial. I'm a Gen Xer. And in this email, I was joking around how millennials have all the fun. Like, they have all the cool memes. Like, right? We're like the lost generation. We have real funny jokes about us. And so my segue simply was, and I was talking about how in this email, how I felt like millennials were this elite group amongst themselves. Like, when they talk about themselves, they talk about themselves as like, we're not calling ourselves Gen Xers, but they call themselves as millennials. And so my segue in that email, my point was I was trying to get people to join my Facebook group. Simply, my segue was, want to know what group you can be part of, millennial or not. So that was my segue, is I was tying this story about how I was feeling really left out to how everyone's included in our group, in our Facebook group. So that would be one example. I had another one where I talked about how I was in college, and when I was when I had moved out, I moved out of a semi-strict home, a great home, but parents who cared and really kept their eye on me. And all of a sudden, I was, taken to this point in college where I had all these choices, right? But with the freedom came all these choices, where before you didn't have choices. You were told what to do and had to be home. Exactly. And so my segue here was, you have lots of choices on the online world. And let me tell you why this choice is the best one for you. So, just kind of tying these, like, really, and so as you can see, I'm talking about stories of something that happened, 25 years ago. I just found that was my 25-year reunion. I'm almost passed out. So 25 years ago, and I was able to tie it into something that's happening today. So this doesn't have to be something that's happened yesterday. This can be stories from your entire life. And all of a sudden you have this lots of content open to you. These can be even client stories. So there's a lot of story around us. And the last one I will give is, I wrote an email. This was a fan favorite, I think, about, I have a pug and how he's turning 10 and his snoring has hit a whole new level, where he was sleeping with my son in his room and my son, who's 17, kicked him out. Like, he was like, I can't sleep with him anymore. He's keeping me awake and poor Frank is at his door trying to get in at night. And so in this, my segue simply was you have to rise above the noise and write emails that are louder than Frank snoring. So here I was able to take this parallel or metaphor about how noisy the online world is and apply it back to my pug snoring. So I say that all to say your stories can be fun. And like you write a story about a dog, everyone's opening it and replying it. I mean, that's a bonus tip here. So
that's a really good tip. I would always read things about Frank. I know I would.
Yes, Frank's a fan favorite. So
he is. I love Frank. His face is so cute. So I love those examples that you give us. It kind of takes the abstractness away a little bit and really focuses on how we can create these segues. And I'm excited to share the link with everybody who's listening about that so that they can go ahead and get the rest of the examples that that you share. Are there any do's or don'ts that we should be following when we're creating segues?
Yes. And I think some of these do's too are just writing in general, which is going to be my first do, which is do practice. Everyone becomes better writers. I'm actually part of this writing group, and I was having some of my own work critiqued last week, and the person who was critiquing it, said this to me, and it was just such a good reminder that the only way, the way we become better writers is by writing more. So when you're feeling stuck, that's not a bad thing, right? When we're feeling stuck in our writing, or maybe it's taking a moment, is really, really remembering that to become a better writer, to doing all this takes a little time. So done is better than perfect. Write something, get it out there. This is something I have to tell myself all the time when I want to go back and, fix it or shine it up more. And I love, once again, I always talk about Lora Belgrade because she's my favorite, but she talks about being prolific, which I like, if we don't know what that is, she just talks about how writing more and writing more often is how you start to see what your audience responds to. This is where they talk, this is where we actually find out what works and what doesn't work. And the only way to do that is to actually get it out into the world. The great part of what we do too is that it's online, right? This isn't something that someone's going to be staring out in print forever, right? It's an email that most likely will get probably deleted after someone reads it. If someone's trying to keep, unless you're me and keep every email forever, or something that's an Instagram post that they're going to read today, but they're not going to be overthinking. I think we're all a little too hard on ourselves, including myself. So that's a pep talk for me, as well as you. So I think my second part was don't overthink it. And it goes back to a shameless plug here. Grab my guide, use those 10 segues at the back of it, and just start this process. It's not something that has to be, the more you write, the easier it will become. Something I don't have on my list, but I will mention really quickly too, is when you start thinking about your stories a little bit differently and what's going on with your life, things will start to call out to you. All of a sudden you'll be like, oh yeah, that's a great parallel of what, even yesterday, my daughter threw away her brand new bathing suit. And I was like, oh, what can I use and tie this together? Or she needed something last minute for a project at Michael's. Well, I could talk about how important it is to be prepared in your business. With as much as I want to be upset with her, maybe I've done something really specific, and then maybe have a call to action of, hey, if you want me to help you get prepared in your business, let me offer you my services. So there's just, when you start looking at your stories, you start seeing them from a different filter. My last do here is sign up for emails for people who do this well. So the 3 ways that you become a better writer is writing more often. Oh, great. Now I'm going to forget my second point is to write more often. The second point I will say, I know it is. Write more often. read people's work, start noticing what you like about how someone writes, and then start emulating those formulas. You can start noticing structure. And so once again, going back to people's like signing up for someone like Laura Belgray, she's the master at the segue. Signing up for my emails, once again, shameless plug. I do this, almost every email I write. So and then the third way is to have people critique your work. I mean, if you're not in an environment where someone can, just send this over to a friend that I think it's great to get someone's eyes on it who maybe isn't in your field and say, what do you think about this? Does this make sense to you? And that really helps. So those would be my do's.
You do? Do you have a list of don'ts for us?
Yes, I do.
Oh, cool.
The don'ts are, my first don't when it comes to your emails here is don't send boring promotional emails. You cannot rise above the noise in this market with emails that are simply promoting your stuff. Find fun ways, and this is why I'm so passionate about the segues. Find fun ways to turn your stories into your promotional emails. So another point we should be really clear is I think you should be selling in your emails, and I think you should be selling often. I think you can do that. I think you can sell more often and more effectively when you're using a lot of stories with segues with good calls to action. So that would be my first point. My second point is, and we talked about this a little earlier, is to not only think about yourself. So when you're writing these stories, really think about how you're going to apply it to the reader and their life, their struggles, their objections, and their hopes and dreams. So I'm always thinking about how my reader is going to take it. And the third thing is don't be afraid to talk about things that you think is mundane. And one of my quotes is the magic is in the mundane. And our day-to-day lives, and we talked about this a lot earlier, is people just want to know what's going on with us. And so don't be afraid to share one of my mentors and friends, Marisa Corcoran, talks about slice of life moments. That's how she describes it. Don't be afraid to talk about these little life moments that happen, the things that happen to us on a day-to-day basis in these stories. You'll be surprised how often people really want to hear what's going on with what you're doing when you're using the clever segue behind it. So that's it. That's it for my don'ts.
That's awesome. But that makes it so much more clear now how to go about attacking a segue and not being so intimidated by them. I know I always was, and I think your the download that you have for everybody is really going to help them, because you said there's 10 in there that people can start using right away.
There's 10 segues. I have examples from 4 superstar copywriters. I also have 3 examples, one of them being myself, of how you can do this in your Instagram captions as well. So what I do is I actually have the entire emails or entire captions, and then I have commentary of, okay, here was their story. Here is how they tied it together. And this is why this email works.
So I did have just one little question. Like, is there a rule of thumb, and maybe it depends, but is there a rule of thumb of how long your story should be before you go into a segue?
Yes, I think that's a great question. And the rule of thumb is as long as your story is interesting. So
okay.
you can write. Once again, one of my favorite quotes from Laura Belgray is, no one complained about an email that was too short, right? So a lot of times there's areas we can shorten up. I know I have to really take an editing eye to my own emails and think, if I cut this entire line out, would it matter? Does it matter to the story? So using transitions, making sure we're, even within our story, using a lot of transitional sentences helps, making sure that each line counts. I don't think there is a matter of short or long. I think it matters is, can you get your point across? Can you get it up, clearly and concisely? So we don't want to talk just to talk, and we want to look also like we want to make every word count. So are there words that are in there that don't need to be in there? Are there sentences that can be restructured to be, even stronger sentences? So, but part of that too, I think it comes back to is some of that just takes time. I think sometimes the more you write, the better you get at really making things really, really tight. And I know it's something I'm still working on is how can I make this really, really tight and clean and interesting from the beginning?
So when you're segueing to a call to action or a CTA, is that something, can that be a strong sell point, or is that something to lead them somewhere else in your funnel? Like,
Oh, I think it absolutely can be a strong sales point. I think it's whenever I go to write something, I think about my main purpose. What is the one action? Because we really only want to have one call to action, no matter what we're doing. Sometimes I break this rule a little bit, but for the most part, I think, what do I want people to sign up for my offer today? Do I want people to grab this new freebie? Do I want people to go to my Instagram post? So I think about the one action that I want them to take, but definitely, especially in a sales action, it can be a very strong sale at the bottom. And I think it should be. What you're doing with your story is you're hopefully changing the reader's mind of why they need your product or service. You're having them view it maybe from a different angle that they've never thought about it before, which opens up to the sale. And that's why it doesn't seem super salesy, because you're kind of showing them why they might need something with an example.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. Brenna, this was so interesting. Is there anything else that we need to know about segues before we finish up our time here today?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, practice makes perfect. Grab my guide. I truly believe it will help you. Not only do I, want you on my email list, but I really think that the segue guide is such a, it's a 20-page guide, but it's not 20 pages of information. It's 20 pages of showing you how this works and giving you so many examples that you can run off and start applying to your writing today. So you start connecting more and selling more, because that's really what it all comes down to.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. This is awesome. How can people get in touch with you or connect with you online?
I'm kind of going through a bit of a rebranding. So right now, my website is still thesocialrescue.com. And no matter what, you'll be able to find me over there. On Instagram, though, I am Brenna McGowan Co. So, but if you search The Social Rescue, I'll also come up. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was so super helpful. And you guys get on her email list, because her emails are really entertaining. I love them. And they talk about Frank every once in a while too.
Yes, they do. So thank you so much for having me, Laura. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for coming back. Hey there. I just want to say thank you for spending time with me here today. I know your time is super valuable, which is why I am dedicated to providing lots of usable, actionable information in the shortest amount of time possible. Before you go, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a future episode. And if you have ideas or topics you would like me to cover in an upcoming show, let me know about it in the comment section provided.